All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the surprisingly complex world of international shipping. We're going to declassify the essential documents that are basically passports for the products you use every single day. I mean, really think about it. It feels like magic, right? You click buy, and a few days later, poof, a box shows up. But behind that one simple click is this incredible, intricate paper trail. A whole series of contracts and declarations that guide your package across oceans and borders, through customs, and finally right into your hands. So let's decode it. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll talk about this whole idea of product passports. Then, we're going to dive into the key documents for shipping by air, by sea, and by land. After that, we'll see why one tiny mistake can be so incredibly costly, and finally, wrap it all up with why this paperwork is so critical to how our world works. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Passports for Products. This is your guide through that global paper trail. And to really understand this, we're going to be looking at some real-world examples from Diego Andres Moreno. He's a foreign trade analyst down in Colombia, and this is the world he navigates every single day. So the big idea here is actually pretty simple to grasp. Just think of a shipping document like your own passport. Your passport identifies you, right? Well, this document identifies the goods. It says where they came from and where they're going. And just like you can't cross a border without your passport, neither can they. It's the product's official ID for its trip around the world. Now, there's one really critical detail you have to keep in your back pocket for all of this. All the examples we're about to see use a rule called Ex Works, or EXW. Basically, it means the seller's job is done the second the product leaves their warehouse. After that, the buyer's responsible for literally everything else. The shipping, the insurance, the customs fees, you name it. And trust me, this becomes very important later. Okay, moving on. Section 2 is all about shipping by air and a document called the AWB. This is the essential piece of paper for pretty much anything that flies. Let's take a look at a real shipment, a bunch of books flying from Colombia to Panama. So when stuff flies, the main document is called the airway bill, or AWB for short. Think of it as the contract, the proof that the airline has the cargo. It has all the key info, like who's sending it, who's receiving it, and what's inside. In this case, 154 packages of religious books. But here's the most important part. The AWB is not a title of ownership. You can't just hand this paper to someone and say, "Here, the goods are yours now." No way. It's non-negotiable. And boom. This is where that Ex Works rule we talked about really hits home. Because the buyer in Panama agreed to those terms, they're not just paying for the flight. They're on the hook for almost $2,800 in fees in Colombia before the plane has even taken off. It's a pretty powerful lesson in how these little acronyms can have a massive impact on the final cost. Okay, so we've covered the skies. Now let's hit the high seas. We're going to track another shipment, this time books and religious items, leaving from Cartagena, Colombia, and sailing to the Dominican Republic. And out here on the water, the paperwork, well, it gets even more powerful. And right here, this is the absolute game changer. The document for sea freight is called the Bill of Lading, or BL. And like Diego says, it can act as a title of property. This isn't just a receipt anymore, it's basically the deed to the cargo. Whoever holds the original physical BL owns the goods, period. And this one little difference, it gives the Bill of Lading, the BL, just incredible power. Because it's negotiable, the buyer in the Dominican Republic could actually sell that entire shipment to someone else while the ship is still halfway across the Caribbean. All they have to do is sign over the original BL. Think about that. It turns physical cargo into a tradable asset, all while it's still floating on the ocean. And just look at the crazy level of detail that goes into one of these. You've got the ship's actual name, the Bertundi, the exact route it's taking, and a super precise breakdown of the cargo. This one's even labeled LCL, which means less than container load, so it's sharing a container with other stuff. Every single one of these details has to be perfect. All right, we've done air, we've done sea. Now for our last example, let's hit the road. We're going to follow a shipment of books, traveling by truck all the way from Bogota, Colombia, right across the border to its final stop in Quito, Ecuador. You know, you might think a truck journey is simple, but nope, It's a whole process. The truck has to stop in a Colombian town called Ipiales to clear export customs. Then it crosses the border into Tulcan, where a totally different agent in Ecuador takes over for that final leg of the journey. And there's one specific document that governs this whole handover. That document is the Carta Porte Internacional por Carretera, or CPIC. It's basically the AWB or the BL, but for trucks. It's the contract, the receipt, and it's got all the details that the customs officers at that border need to see to let these 180 boxes of cargo pass through without any trouble. Okay, so we've met the big three, the passports for products. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, what happens when the info on them doesn't perfectly match up with all the other paperwork, like the invoice? Oh, this is where things get really, really expensive. Just imagine this. The invoice calls the cargo automotive pieces, but the bill of lading says vehicle components, and then the customs form says car spare parts. Now, you and I know that's all the same thing, right? But to a customs officer, that's a huge red flag. That kind of inconsistency immediately triggers an inspection, and that inspection causes delays, which means you're paying expensive storage fees at the port, and you might even get hit with some pretty hefty fines. And this gets to the real heart of the job. The most critical part isn't just filling out forms, it's being a detective. Diego's main role is to go through every single piece of paper with a fine-tooth comb and make sure every detail, every weight, every quantity, every description is 100% identical across all documents before that shipment is allowed to leave. All right, Section 6. Let's wrap this all up. Why does all this paperwork matter so much? This is the big takeaway for anyone who's ever thought about selling something internationally. So let's boil it all down. You've got the AWB. That's your non-negotiable receipt for air cargo. Then the super powerful BL, the negotiable title of property for sea cargo, and the CPOIC, the contract for anything on the road. And the one golden rule that ties them all together? Consistency is everything. And hey, remember that truck full of books going to Ecuador? Here's why getting this stuff perfect matters so much. The value of that merchandise was almost $25,000. All of that money just sitting there in a truck, riding on the accuracy of one single document, the Carta Porte. At the end of the day, this really isn't just about shuffling paper. It's about your money, your risk, and keeping your customers happy. Getting this right is the line in the sand between a business that can sell to anyone, anywhere in the world, and one that gets its products hopelessly stuck in a warehouse collecting dust and fines. You know, it really makes you think, doesn't it? We've just scratched the surface of the hidden paperwork that makes a simple online order possible. What other invisible systems, what other contracts and codes and documents are humming along silently in the background every single day, holding our entire modern world together? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.